What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Freedom to Flourish podcast. This is going to be a great episode today. I'm not entirely sure what we're going to call it yet. We haven't really decided on that, but the goal of today is just to be really transparent in regards to a lot of really interesting cases that we've had over the last couple of years in practice, and kind of awesome outcomes that we had with these things that walked into our office that we probably just raised an eyebrow and we're like, we will see how this goes. We can always talk to somebody and say, hey, I'm kind of suspecting based off of my experience and what we find with the testing that we do, maybe this will be what we come up with. But the beauty of what we do and the different avenues of our training is we can combine a couple different methods to really assess what's going on and find answers where a lot of docs can otherwise not find great answers. So it's really cool stuff. So we're going to have some really interesting things to talk about today. I think we both have either 4 or 5 cases that we just kind of noted down that we're just going to chat about. And yeah, it's going to be a really good one. So it's good stuff. So anyway, Dr. Joel, how are things going this morning?
Hey, things are going well. This definitely will be an exciting and interesting episode, I think. So between all the kind of normal cases and normal things that we see, that we talk about all the time, whether it's hormone imbalances or chronic gut issues or fatigue, things like that, we see all kinds of conditions like this. Yet most people probably don't realize we see a lot of like odd/weird stuff as well, and we find a lot of odd/weird root causes as well. So a lot of times, like you mentioned on maybe if we're doing a free phone consult or we're talking with somebody and they say, hey, this is the issue I have. A lot of times it's like, hey, this is probably where it's coming from, just based off our experience and things like that. But ultimately, when we jump into the muscle testing, sometimes it could be coming from a number of different places. And we'll get into some of those things today. So Dr. Tim, I'll give a quick kind of foreshadowing of what I'll get into with my cases, just for our listener to have something to look forward to there. And then I'll have you kind of do the same. And then we'll just kind of go in, case by case. So a couple different cases I'll talk about. Patient came in, basically felt like he'd had a heart attack before, felt like he had 1 week to live. He was having a lot of heart attack symptoms coming on. So we addressed things. And I think it was in like 2 to 3 weeks, essentially, a lot of those symptoms started dumbing down. And to this day, he's is just amazed and super thankful with everything. We'll get into the details of that. One patient got sick with a virus, developed tongue fatigue, could not really speak very well. As soon as he would start talking, his tongue would start doing that number. And so within, I think, 1 or 2 visits, we had found a number of deficiencies and things, and his tongue returned back to normal. Have a patient that had a hamstring injury. It actually popped, which is never a good sign with muscles or ligaments. And we found a really interesting kind of solution with that. One patient with thyroid nodules that we addressed, that she had hyperthyroidism, which is really common with nodules. And we actually were able to get those to go away, which we've been able to do that a number of times, but I'll share this one case with her. And then probably maybe 1 or 2, depending on how much time we have. 14-year-old girl that was diagnosed with lupus nephritis. Basically, they told her she had 2 years for her kidneys. Otherwise, she'll have to have kidney transplants. And, thankfully, we've been able to stop that and reverse it. So she's not testing as having any autoimmunity anymore. Her kidneys are doing great and all that good stuff within a matter of like 3 months. So, and then the last one, just extremely painful UTI. Went to the hospital, of course, did all the tests, was prescribed different things. Came in after going to, I think it might have been urgent care, found like an herb and things like that. And all the pain went away within like 24, 36 hours. So we'll get into a few things, but I wanted to foreshadow, Dr. Tim, just so people kind of have an idea of something to look forward to there.
Yeah, those all sound very interesting and very different from the things that I'm going to talk about.
This is good. We got a good little mix of everything. It's good.
That's what's so funny about this, though, is we will end up having 99% of the same things come into our offices, and then that 1% is always like off the wall.
Who knows?
Completely different. So my list, just to touch on real quick, just recently had a patient who I think I was supposed to see her again this week, but she's totally like recovered. And so I will not be seeing her again,
Awesome.
which that's kind of the goal, right?
Absolutely.
Left-sided, complete, like she could draw a line down her face, down her abdomen, left side of her body. She would get like this tingling, just this weird sensation, just on the left side of the body, and ended up finding that it was tied to her gallbladder with some insulin issues. That was interesting. Had this patient recently who we worked through a lot of different things, but she had chronic plantar fasciitis, keeping her from running, all kinds of stuff. And we found it was tied to adrenals and all sorts of other causes. But really the final thing that truly got rid of all the pain was having her do a couple different diaphragm things. So we'll get into that. Had a patient who came to see me on 35th, 36th day of her period. Yeah, you heard that right. She
Wow.
had been, menstruating for 35 or 36 days by the time she came to see me.
Wow.
But that wasn't even her biggest problem as far as it goes for quality. I mean, I don't know. It was definitely high on the list, but she had concussions 14 years prior, and since then couldn't run without getting a terrible migraine. And by the end of it, she was completely good to go.
Wow.
A kid, 21-year-old recently, who he had repeated sixth grade because he missed so much school, because he just would get really dizzy, nauseous. He would throw up like numerous times a week, if not every single day. And that's completely good now. And then the last lady, a mold patient who displaced from her home due to mold. And she actually came to me when she had a couple months prior had a spinal compression fracture that wasn't healing well at all. And by the time that we got through cleaning up the mold, it was basically healed, and she was able to move without pain and everything. So it was good stuff. So anyway, let's Dr. Joel, why don't you talk to us about your most profound case? That way we get all the big ones out of the way. And we'll just kind of go back and forth.
Yeah, I would say, my cases, I'm just kind of looking through, and a couple of them are definitely more profound in the way that just like the severity of the situation. So I'll just kind of talk about this one gentleman came in. He had a heart attack before, and we were able to get his visit moved up, but he came in, and I kid you not, he says, "I think I have 1 week left to live." And it was, when patients say things like that, obviously that's not good. But it's also something that you have to take very serious. And so we kind of talked about things, and we worked through a bunch of things and really worked to get through, like testing, like what's going on with the heart, what's going on with the cardiovascular system, and overall what is really impacting everything here. So I think part of the reason why this gentleman's about 50 years old. The reason why he felt like he had only a week to live was because he'd had a heart attack before, and he was very familiar with these symptoms, the pain going down his arm. He would also get like different pain and stiffness in some of his fingers and stuff like that. And so we saw him. This was actually last year. I'm just looking over some of my notes here. Saw him. And we worked through things very I would probably say more aggressively, just considering the situation. And we found a number of different things. And he said 2 days after the visit, he said he felt like a champ, felt like almost all of his symptoms were no longer an issue, not necessarily 100%, but significant improvement. And so during our first visit, what we found was, number one, a lot of high oxidized cholesterol. He basically needed a ton of antioxidants through vitamin E. Also needed vitamin B3 niacinamide, which helps with overall just basically the endurance and aerobic function of the heart muscle. We also found a couple other big things, such as where I think the root of the oxidized cholesterol and the high LDL and the plaquing, like a lot of where that the root of that inflammation was coming from was actually, I think, his gut health, where we found some parasites and did some herbs for that. And then the third thing, which I think was most important there, was actually an imbalance with his immune system from the COVID shots. And so the way that things were testing and the way that everything was looking clinically, I was like, hey, we usually don't address everything this quick, this aggressively, but I really think that this is what you need to do. And of course, we discussed, hey, you know, should you go to the hospital? Should you do all these things? And according to what the patient was wanting and so forth, we talked through all that. So worked through all that stuff. And then within, 2 days, he said he had felt amazing. All those symptoms were regressing, essentially almost immediately. And then within a month, 6 weeks, the guy just, I mean, he felt so good about his health that, to be honest, he kind of got a little bit laxed with taking the supplements and continuing to eat well and things like that. So really cool situation. Unfortunately, kind of a tough, sad situation that, you know, he was in that situation where he felt like things were, you know, not looking good. But really, really cool that we kind of jump in and not necessarily guess at what might be going on, not necessarily guess at what we're going to do to fix things, but really just jump into things, test his system with the muscle testing and figure out exactly what his body needs. And so he's doing really well, and just he's just super, super, super grateful. So Dr. Tim, should we go back and forth on things, or should I just keep rolling through a few other things?
Let's go back and forth. Let's just kind of mix it up. But yeah, I mean, that's incredible. It's always huge when, you know, I know you're the same way. I tend to fixate on patients that I can't help and that things around going great. Those are the ones that keep me up at night, because, you know, we always joke around and say, you know, I love hanging out with my patients, but I would love if I didn't have to.
Yeah.
Although that may not be the best business model, you know, if I was just in it for the money.
You know,
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'll definitely say I'm not. I do this for the right reasons, I think.
Yeah.
I really enjoy helping people. And whenever you are able to help somebody that significantly, it always feels good. You know, it kind of reaffirms and makes up for all the ones that you can't help, you know. But anyway, one of my most profound ones. So the lady that came in when she was on day 35, 36, somewhere around there, I'll just say 35, day 35 of her period. So we had chatted on the phone, and we were just talking about, she's like, yeah, I've been on my period for forever, basically. I've got migraine headaches the last 14 years since I had like 7 concussions, played college soccer, and just had all kinds of problems. Couldn't run at all without getting migraines. And it was just whole slew of things, chronic gut issues. She just basically had everything that you could possibly think of. So we get working on stuff, and right off the bat found that she had a significant estrogen dominant issue. Wasn't detoxifying estrogens in the liver efficiently, so gave her something to help with that. I don't remember if it was B6 or if it was artichoke extract, but we ended up doing both of those for quite a while, a couple bottles of those. But by the time that I saw her 2 weeks later, her period had stopped, and it stopped 2 or 3 days after the first visit, which I thought was incredible. But if there were just way too many estrogens that wouldn't allow the period to stop, then that makes good sense. So anyway, with that being the case, that was one thing that had saw some relief, but that kind of opened up another can of worms, in that whenever you're working through hormone problems, if somebody's either on their period for way too long or they never get their period, as soon as things get somewhat normalized, that's when the clock starts ticking to see where it falls relative to that 28-day range that your cycle should be. Well, her cycles ended up being pretty short. They're moving forward for a while, which makes sense, because that's also an estrogen dominant symptom. It just wasn't so severe that she just kept bleeding continuously. But along the way, we basically started to improve upon gut health, all those things. She had a lot of low back pain, and all of those things, each visit, we just kind of chipped away at them. But eventually we got to the point where we couldn't really find a ton of indicators for her migraines anymore, but she was still getting headaches if she ran. And it was the funniest thing, because she was kind of embarrassed about it, because I had her jog around the office.
Yeah.
So I walked out to the waiting room, and Sarah, my receptionist, I'm sure was just like, what are they doing?
Yeah.
And she doesn't care. She's always like, yeah, I mean, I've realized as time goes on, you do weird stuff. And so there's no expecting anything or thinking anything's weird at this point. And so the only time that I could mimic the same things that we were finding, like weak neck extensors and different cranial subluxations or cranial faults showing up, was if she was running, or when she was on the table. To make it easier, I actually did, if our listeners want to Google it, there's a orthopedic test called the anvil test, where basically you take your fist and you punch somebody in their heel up towards their hip. So that way it basically jams the whole leg. And the reason for doing that was to mimic the impact of running. And doing that, I had to combine all kinds of different challenges together, but we would basically slam the heel and then check things like the liver, check things like cranial sutures, neck extensors, all sorts of other muscles, to try to mimic those same things that we were finding that were more surface level previously. And when you know it, they started testing. And so we worked off of that, cleared all that stuff out, and we eventually got to where things were doing pretty good, but still running still messed with things. And so we eventually found, I don't recall exactly what we did, but we ended up finding that there was very significant correlation between her continued use of her SSRI medication with not resolving the cranial faults that she had. And so we worked our way off of that. We worked together to detoxify that, and she talked to her prescribing physician to get off of that. And then once we got her off of that, St. John's wort was the magic elixir that fixed all of her problems. So once we were able to actually heal the gut and encourage serotonin production, it normalized all those cranial faults, and she was able to run at that point with no problems.
Awesome.
She had normal 28-day cycles moving forward, no more headaches, and no back pain. Like literally everything that she came in for, she just kept saying, like, this has been the most worth it experience, health wise. Like I would do it again in a heartbeat, and I'd pay more. I'm like, don't say that, because then I'll just charge you more. No, I'm just kidding. And it's just always funny when patients say that, because I'm like, don't say that. And what's funny is, at that time I was so booked to where we were looking 2 to 3 months out for new patients. And so we had reserved time slots that people wanted to skip the line, where it was an additional fee to get seen very quickly. And she was one of the patients that took me up on that. And she paid more. And she still said it was way worth it, because, I mean, wow, I can't imagine having those problems. And by the time that we got through all those visits, she was good to go, like completely healed.
Yeah.
So it was great.
Awesome, dude. Amazing. It's so important, the gut health. And we talked about this at one point, but like abdominal migraines and like that relationship, not that this is what that was, but it kind of was like a cousin of it, right? Like, yeah, the connection between the gut health and serotonin. And then of course, 99% of it's coming from your gut, but that's largely also a brain hormone. So of course it's going to impact your head and your brain and things like that. So it's interesting though, that connection between the movement and the running, and then the brain and the head and everything. Super cool stuff.
I still don't quite understand why that was the case, but it was.
Yeah.
It's the beauty of what we do. We can draw those connections.
Totally. Well, I think that there's an interesting area of research that we could dig into more regarding like the bacteria in the gut biome, and certain bacteria being more anaerobic, which means they don't use as much oxygen, and then certain bacteria being more aerobic. But then also like when you're moving and you're running, there's a lot of physical stimulation to the gut health. I mean, a lot of people, when they run, they tend to have more and better bowel movements. When people run, their mood tends to be better. And I have to think that has to be related, yes, to blood flow and nitric oxide production, all that, detoxing, things like that. But it has to also be related to when we move, it can be very therapeutic for the gut health. And then that can increase overall dopamine and serotonin production in the gut and things like that. So there's a bunch of different things, but all very interesting nonetheless.
Definitely. Yeah.
Cool.
I think I might consider that, kind of in that abdominal migraine category because
Yeah.
the at least the solution was the same. Usually with those, you will arrive at healing the gut and encouraging neurotransmitter production to fix the headaches.
Right.
But abdominal migraines, a lot of times it's the neurotransmitter stuff that affects the gut other than infections and can sometimes affect the head. So
Yep.
anyway, besides the point. But anyway,
Cool. All right.
let's do the next one.
Yep. Interesting case for sure. Another kind of intense one. So yeah, 14-year-old girl diagnosed with lupus nephritis. So if you're not super familiar with that, the lupus part is talking about like systemic lupus, an autoimmune condition, and then nephritis referring to the kidneys. So essentially what happens is you develop this autoimmune condition, lupus, and the immune system is actually then starts attacking not just like the joints and things like that, but it actually attacks the kidneys. And if you research much into it, it's not a condition you really want to mess around with. It's a condition that can fairly quickly lead to chronic like kidney issues. And if it doesn't ultimately get resolved, ultimately you need to have a kidney transplant. And so super, super intense thing for, of course, a 14-year-old girl to go through. This girl, though, she's a champ. I mean, just her mindset, her mood, everything was incredible. Her parents were super strong for her and trying to navigate this whole thing and figure out what's going on. So essentially, some of the backstory: last October 2024 had a positive ANA lab test, meaning, hey, there's some kind of autoimmune thing going on here. Had in this last February 2025 had blood in the urine. Okay, that's never a good thing. And so eventually started having significant abdominal pain. I mean, absolutely intense abdominal pain, and ended up going to the hospital in April of this year. So of course they do all the workup, the testing, they come up with this diagnosis. Hey, you've got this autoimmune condition where your body's attacking your kidneys. And essentially what they told her was, if you don't get this under control, you could need a kidney transplant maybe in as soon as 2 years and that kind of thing. So obviously 14-year-old girl, that's not something that you want to kind of have to walk through and experience. So when we jumped into things, we had a free phone consult, as I do with many patients. And basically she had, wanted to know like, hey, what can we do for this? Because the doctors are saying, hey, you need to take IV steroids. You need to take, she was actually put on a chemo drug, which is wild to imagine for a 14-year-old girl. But a chemo medication, an IV chemo medication. And she was doing these things once a week. It was like for 2 or 3 days straight with all the treatments. And she'd do that once a week. And I mean, talk about like physically exhausting and just having to be like in a hospital all day and all the things that entails. And so during our consult, I said, hey, autoimmune conditions always have a trigger. There's something that's causing the immune system to attack your own body. And so we talked about that a little bit. They said, hey, we wonder if it could be mold. Maybe we've had some mold issues. And of course, I explained most triggers with autoimmunity comes from infections, food sensitivities, mold, and similar things like that. And so during our first visit, we jumped in and we found, hey, there's an autoimmune issue with the immune system. That's the lupus. It's triggered by mold. And so we start working on detoxing it. All these things, of course, we've talked about in our mold episodes, but we start detoxing it. And then we found there's actually a mold infection in her gut as well. And so we start addressing that with herbs and things like that. And as we started doing this, I'm going to hypothesize here on some of the, or not hypothesize, but I'm going to guesstimate here on some of the timelines. I believe it was within a month, she was feeling better. She was just having less pains. She was overall feeling better. Within, I believe it was about 2 months, the autoimmune markers were no longer testing positive. So we had reversed the ANA and all the labs were improving. So a lot of the labs with lupus nephritis, show that there's blood in the urine, there's protein in the urine. Whenever protein gets through the urine, that's a sign that the kidneys are really not doing well. And so we had that. We had high blood urea nitrogen coming out, or actually building up in the body because the kidneys weren't able to detox it. And so we started to see week after week, month after month, that those numbers all started improving. And I believe it was within about 3 months, April. We saw it at the end of April. So it was May, June, July. Within 3 to 4 months, of course, the ANA was negative. The blood and the urine tests are all coming back perfectly. And she's actually, able to start weaning off of these intense IV, treatments and so forth. So she's looking amazing based on the labs. She no longer has lupus nephritis, which is super amazing. And that was all within like 3 to 4 months, which is also kind of wild. So with this testimony and this story, I always tell people, hey, there's a root to what's going on with your health. You need to get to the bottom of it, figure out what's going on there, and then what your body needs to do to heal from it, what you need to support your body with. A lot of doctors will look at things and say, you're going to have this forever. You need to do this forever. And I largely disagree most of the time with that. I know, Dr. Tim, we talk about that all the time. So they're doing awesome. Of course, the parents are coming in now and they're getting some support with their health and all that good stuff. So lupus nephritis.
That's kind of wild. ANA, we've talked about this before. It's something that can be very, very difficult to shift. And it's an indicator that your body's dealing with a ton of inflammation. And I think that's crazy that was reversed, because that doesn't usually happen.
Yeah. Well, we're super thankful. I really need to look back through different records with patients, but it's not the first time we've been able to reverse ANA. We've been able to do it a number of times. It's definitely never easy. It can take some decent work getting into overall healing the gut, ultimately, reversing food sensitivities, things like that along the way, addressing inflammation, stuff like that. But it's definitely something we've been able to see quite a bit. It's been really, really cool. So, all right, Dr. Tim, what do you say we do like one more each, and then for sake of time, we'll have to wrap up here.
Yeah, maybe we'll just do a part 2, because I'm actually enjoying this episode. I think our listeners are going to think this is cool too.
Okay.
Because we got some cool cases here.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I've only talked about one. Okay. Which one do we talk about next? Just in the topic of mold, I'm gonna tell the story of this lady who had a spinal compression fracture. That mold was the underlying cause. So before she came in, she already knew that mold was a problem. I believe she had listened to our podcast and was listening about mold and was like, oh my God, this guy's local. This is great. And she was considering seeing some doc in like the Northeast somewhere, for it, like Connecticut or something. And I'm like, no, we're going to get you sorted out. It'll be fine. I promise. But they hate her and her husband and their daughter. They had been displaced from their home. They were living out of a hotel. I haven't seen her in a while, so I'm not sure if that's still the case. But throughout the course of treatment, she was still living in the hotel, and they had been out of their house for 8-9 months, maybe something like that. It's been a while, but either way, she knew she had this mold problem, and had gotten the home tested. They were getting the mold remediated. It was just a whole thing. And for years and years and years, she's been getting this cough that's just been getting worse and worse and worse and worse, to the point where, man, she'd be laying on my table and she'd just start hacking and hacking and hacking. And it was awful. I just felt bad. It was just this terrible dry cough that she just couldn't shake. And then on top of that, she had just terrible fatigue, just felt just super weak, terrible muscle strength. And then she had this spinal compression fracture that just happened out of nowhere. Osteoporosis, the whole shebang. And it all kind of came full circle in that basically all of her low back muscles were hypertonic, holding on too tight, like her erector muscles, the ones that support the spine. But then a lot of her pelvic stability muscles, like her piriformis, glute med, all of those muscles were weak. And so she basically was trying to use her erector muscles to hold on where her pelvic muscles should be stabilizing properly. And due to that imbalance and the inflammation coming from this mold that had taken hold in the gut, she just couldn't heal. And so day one, I was like, we'll see how quickly this fracture heals, because she had been, I think it was like 8 or so weeks at least, that she had been wearing a brace and like taking it real easy for this thing to heal. And she had recent imaging, and it's almost like it didn't heal over that course of time, and her pain hadn't really changed at all. So she was going to PT, doing all kinds of stuff, and it wasn't really getting anywhere. And so there's a pretty common correlation that we'll see between low back pain and lack of back injuries healing when there is some sort of chronic gut issue, an imbalance of the microbiome, potentially due to mold. And so day one, I was like, man, well, I guess we'll see how this goes. And she's like, cool. All right, well, we'll see, because I don't see how that can be tied together. And so we started having her take some herbs and taking some stuff to help detoxify the acetaldehyde and mycotoxins, all of those things. And I mean, right off the bat, I mean, her low back pain started decreasing a little bit. And she just overall started to feel a little bit better. When she would come in, she could actually have a conversation instead of just breaking to cough and having to sit up and drink some water. Because it was that bad. I mean, she wasn't able to talk all that long without just hacking and hacking. But another thing that I forgot to mention, the acetaldehyde toxicity that we had found was testing off of her gallbladder. And when it comes to bone mineral density, you need a couple different things. You need calcium and all of the minerals to go along with it. You need fats. You need fat soluble vitamins like vitamin A, vitamin D, all those. And then you need tissue acidity, as in like you need sufficient stomach acid to push the calcium and all those things into the tissues. So of those things, fats, fat soluble vitamins, tissue acidity, all those go hand in hand with gallbladder function. And so her gallbladder was really, really irritated because of this acetaldehyde toxicity. And so as soon as we started cleaning that up, it's like she just started to feel a little bit stronger. She had some skin itchiness that started decreasing, which is also a calcium symptom, and a fat metabolism symptom. All these things started getting better and better. And there was one, it's so funny. Every single time that she came in, she'd be like, oh, I was doing so great, and then I did this. I was doing so great, and then I did this. But she's just one of those people that just is kind of a klutz. And so she would even say that. She's like, I'm just clumsy. I'm just clumsy. Like, it just happens. This is just how I've always been. And her back, she had like zero pain for a couple weeks after we had done like an herb or two. And then she had tripped and kind of fell sideways on an ottoman that she had in her living room. And of course, the back was hurting again after that. And so she's wearing a brace again. And I was like, all right, well, keep moving, because moving is going to help, yada, yada. Got her on, hopefully at that point, one of the final herbs. And at that point, she came in the next time and she's like, my back doesn't hurt at all. Like, I feel strong. I can bend over. I can pick things up. I can do all these things. And it feels really, really, really good. Zero pain. And she came back. She's like, yeah, I actually went to PT yesterday. And they said, I don't know why, but all of a sudden you're doing awesome on all of these things that we're assessing. And you basically have graduated. So like there's not a whole lot. I mean, you're where you need to be as far as we're concerned. So she was done going to PT at that point. But it ended up being just cleaning up the gut, herbs for the gut, and then vitamins, minerals to help detoxify the acetaldehyde toxicity. And by the end of it, the cough was basically gone. And then beyond that, the low back pain and the fracture, I mean, she was doing absolutely great. We still had to do a little bit of healing of her lungs afterwards. So she actually took something called pneumotrophin from Standard Process.
Nice.
It's basically just bovine lung tissue to help repair the lungs, because I mean, she had mold that they could see on imaging that had taken hold in, like, she had scarring in her lungs because of it. And so the pneumotrophin was very, very helpful to help her get totally away from the rest of that cough. And it's just so funny because she'd be like, oh, my shoulders are hurting me. And then I'd treat the lung reflexes and it would go away. And she's like, oh, stop it. No way. Stop. That's just, you're crazy. And she's
Yeah,
just,
love it.
she's one of those people that like, she'd be like, oh, and then she'd like grab you or something, be like, there's no way.
Yeah.
Like there is a way, I promise. But
Yeah.
that ended up being the thing that was the last piece, was doing the pneumotrophin. And I would assume that she's doing great at this point, because the last time I saw her, she really didn't have anything going on. And I told her, let's see you in a month or so. And if you're doing great, then just give us a call and we'll just push it out until you have problems. But that's usually how it goes. It's like, hey, let's get one on there just in case. But if you're doing great, let's push it out, because there's not really any point, So all in all, fracture, chronic cough, pain, and then chronic lung issues, all of those things. Get away from the mold stimulus, treat the mycotoxins or acetaldehyde, and then treat the mold. Should be good to go. And with her, it was really great. Everything went awesome.
Awesome. I'll share one last one here, and then we'll wrap up, and we'll do a part 2 next time. This one patient came in with some different hormonal imbalance issues. She's in her 60s. Came in with some concerns for thyroid health and Hashimoto's, things like that. And one of the things, a lot of patients for us, Dr. Tim, when they come in, we're asking, like, not just like what's your main issue or main complaint, but what are all of your issues or complaints. And so one thing happened that months prior, she had pulled her hamstring. She pulled her hamstring, it popped, and she was having a lot of issues with it for a while. To the point when I saw her, I can't remember exactly how many months or even how many years it had been, but she said that her function was about 70%, and she didn't have pain, but she also wasn't pushing it very hard. And but at the same time, when she would kind of bend down to touch her toes, like, she could easily feel the discomfort, and that it was not fully healed. And so we worked on a bunch of things. We were mostly working on different things with the hormones and the gut health and stuff like that. And after a few visits, we would do some more work on the hamstrings, working through different little injuries and things like that with the fascia. And nothing really seemed to significantly help it. And so as I was checking a couple other things, I found, her adrenal glands are a pretty big issue across the board with things. I'm wondering if she needs more electrolytes to help healing the muscles and the fascia. And so one of the things that we'll do is, neurolingual testing, where we put a nutrient on the tongue, and then we'll either go through some muscle testing, or we will go through muscle testing, but we'll also have them go through some different ranges of motion and see what their muscles and joints feel like. And so with this patient, I said, hey, I want you to put this, had some pink Himalayan sea salt. I want you to put this on your tongue. So put a little bit on her tongue. And I said, I want you to kind of bend down and touch your toes again, just see if it feels any different. And she does. And as she comes up, her eyes got super big. And then, of course, I was like, that I see that pretty often when we're checking stuff, because like you said, people kind of tend to feel it and stuff like that. So I had her, kind of spit it out. And then I said, how'd that feel? And she goes, I didn't have any discomfort. I didn't have any tightness. I didn't have anything. So we increased the electrolytes just on her food, and had her start drinking it in her water. And I think she was doing 1 teaspoon a day, maybe up to like 2 teaspoons a day, maybe a little bit more. But once we figured that out, I think within the next month or so, the hamstring was great. It was perfect, 100%. And we had done all the massage, we had done all the different things with the gut health and all that stuff, protein, nutrition, all the things, but she needed electrolytes in order to get her muscles healing. And that makes sense. We talk about electrolytes for our muscles all the time, but do we actually get good electrolytes through some good salt? I find that's lacking with most people. So that ended up being a pretty big game changer for her.
Yeah, that's always fun when you can get a real change in the office by doing the testing. I really enjoy doing the oral nutrient testing. Lots of fun. That's awesome.
That's good. So there's a couple cases I didn't quite get to here, and there's actually more. I had a patient with eosinophilic esophagitis. Did I tell you about this patient, Dr. Tim?
I don't recall.
young girl, 11-ish years old, I believe. I believe 11 or 12. But yeah, she'd seen a number of doctors. We'll talk about that one too. But basically, she couldn't help but like she had to keep her mouth closed because she felt like she had to spit up all the time and like 24/7. And of course, the doctors had told her she'll always have this, and she needs to be on the proton pump inhibitor, all that stuff. So we'll talk a little bit more about that and kind of what we found. But literally, by the second visit, her symptoms were like 95% gone, which was obviously pretty mind blowing, I think. So, but there's a number of other cases that like, the more I think about different patients and stuff, I'm like, yeah, that one was actually pretty cool. We should probably talk about that one. So we'll get into those in our next one.
Awesome. Yeah. A couple more that I didn't get to either that will, this should be part 2. I think this will be good. So,
okay. Let's do it.
But yeah,
all right.
Let's get things wrapped up.
Yep. Go for it.
So anyway, I'm Dr. Tim Augustiniak down here at Flourish Functional Wellness Center in Bentonville, Arkansas. If you want to find me online, my website is draugustiniak.com. That's DRAUGUSTYNIAK.com. Or you can find us at flourishfwc.com. On there, I have links to all the socials as well as contact info at the bottom of the homepage. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or suggestions for future episodes, feel free to reach out. And thanks everybody for tuning in today.
Yep. Awesome. Dr. Joel Miller here. You can find me online at drjoelmiller.com. The social media, you can find me on Instagram fairly easily. The practice here is Freedom Health and Wellness in Flower Mound, Texas. If you guys have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to us. Look us up online, find our website, and feel free to contact us at our office. Guys, we hope you've enjoyed this. We'll see you guys in the next one.